Evolution of man or machine. It starts with something primitive and leads to a higher order, to the future. From time to time, Honda introduces revolutionary motorcycles. Then, we build on that base to lead the competition. This is a year of evolution, not revolution. And you've got to stay on top of the changes. Your job depends on it. That's what this program is for. After you've seen it, you should be able to identify new service procedures for 1984 Honda street motorcycles. So, let's get started. We'll be looking at what's new from a service point of view. If a bike has no new service features this year, this is the last time you'll see it on the screen. Now, let's start at the top. The 1984 Goldwings are the best performing touring machines available, the result of an all-new chassis and engine design. To raise the cylinder heads, we tilted the engine up 3 degrees in the front, and we moved it forward 2.5 inches for more tow room. We enlarged the gl1200 to make the biggest Honda motorcycle engine ever, 1200 cc's. So there's a big boost in low and mid-range power. Sure, it's still got 4 opposed cylinders, but there have been so many changes, it's practically a new engine. This new squish band provides better turbulence in the fuel-air mixture for more complete combustion, so there's more roll-on horsepower than ever before. And the Gold Wings now have zero-maintenance hydraulic valve adjusters, similar to the 750 and 700 Shadows. The adjusters turn these eccentric rocker shafts to keep valve clearance constant. Just be sure to install the tappets with their oil holes facing up, and put a cap on top of the ones that go in oil hole first. The full cycle program, service tips for Honda pros, and the shop manual tell you how and when to shim hydraulic valve adjusters. But here's why. By placing the adjuster in the middle of its range, when the parts are installed, it will be best able to compensate for any expansion, contraction, or wear in the valve train. And it won't bottom out or overextend under the worst circumstances. There's a new tool to help you select the proper number of shims, and you use it with the vernier caliper to measure the rocker shaft height. See the shop manual for details here. As a reminder, shimming is required only after refacing the valves or seats, or after installing a new valve, cylinder head, camshaft holder, camshaft, rocker arm, or shaft. And this also applies to the Shadow 750 and 700. Easing maintenance is a hydraulic clutch release, like the one on Magnas and Sabres. And this year, the clutch has a diaphragm-type release spring, instead of the coil springs used before. It makes the lever easy to pull, but keeps engagement pressure high. You can service the clutch plates and inner hub without removing the engine from the bike. But clutch pack disassembly does require a bench press this year. Compress the diaphragm spring just enough to remove the snap ring. The ignition advance is now purely electronic for both engine RPM and vacuum inputs. The vacuum advance sensor is built right into the igniter with a hose to a ported vacuum pickup on carburetor number 4. You can see the igniter parts here, but none are available separately, so the igniter cannot be repaired. The vacuum advance operates only in 4th gear and overdrive, controlled by a signal from this gear position sensor inside the front cover. The sensor is similar to the one used on the V4s. And these new Goldwing carburetors are similar to V4 carbs too. Service procedures are practically the same. Feeding the carbs is an electric fuel pump. The pump relay, under the ignition coils, gets a signal from the ignition, so the pump runs only when the engine is cranking or running, and it stops when the engine stops. To help burn hydrocarbons and reduce emissions, a secondary air supply system uses natural exhaust vacuum pulses to draw fresh air into the exhaust system. These reed valves keep exhaust gases from backing up into the intake tract during pressure pulses. This anti-afterburn valve senses manifold vacuum and cuts the secondary air supply during deceleration. And the slow air cut valve also senses manifold vacuum to richen the mixture during deceleration and prevent backfiring. This year the alternator output is 360 watts, up from 300 last year. That generates more heat, so oil cooling was added to the alternator through this hole in the shaft. The oil flows through these external lines on top of the engine. One goes to the left cylinder head and the other goes to the alternator after passing through a dark-colored limiter bolt. Another important alternator improvement is this new friction drive mechanism to quiet the alternator at low speeds. Below 3,000 RPM, the diaphragm spring washers force the friction case against the driven gear and damper case to provide friction drive for the alternator. That's what quiets it down. Above 3,000 RPM, centrifugal force pushes these 10 balls out against the curved bottom of the friction case, separating the friction drive elements. Then, the regular damper drive takes over. When you disassemble the drive, hold it like this to keep from losing the balls. Well, those are the changes common to all Goldwings. Now, let's look at what's new, just for the Aspencade. The saddlebags and trunk are bigger this year, and they've got secure O-ring seals to keep things dry. The air compressor's in the fairing now, in front of this drying chamber, and there's an electrically controlled pressure decrease circuit. That means no one's going to be tampering with the suspension while the owner isn't around. This new Type 3 radio system is by Panasonic. The cassette deck is standard, as is an intercom capability, and the speaker volume can be set to automatically increase with road speed. Troubleshooting is similar to last year's Type 2, with some exceptions described in your student workbook that came with this program. Okay, now let's have a look at the fastest Honda street bike ever. The V65 Sabre. This V65 engine puts out 121 horsepower at the crank. That's even more than the Magna. The increase is made possible by larger intake and exhaust system volumes. This V4 and all this year's V4s have a rev limiter built into the ignition system. When engine speed exceeds the maximum redline RPM, the limiter shuts off ignition to one pair of cylinders. This will help prevent dropped valves and battered pistons in these free-revving engines.